statement they keep repeating. Okay, he said it. Definitely he said it, and it has a meaning. Anyway, they say Jesus, that he said, and let me rephrase it, he said, don't think I came to bring peace on earth. I didn't come to bring peace, but to bring fire. And fire it is. That's what the Christians brought to the whole world since then. And these are the peoples who time after time occupy other people's lands, kill entire nations, drive people away from their lands. The Christians drove away, the Europeans drove away the Jews from Palestine 2,000 years ago to begin with. It's not us, it's not the Palestinians, it's the Romans. They kicked them out.
Yeah.
And they stayed somewhere for 2,000 years. All of a sudden they came there, remember they have a land. Oh, this is ours now. But it's not theirs because they never owned it. These ones here, they never owned it. Mm-hmm. So now when we talk about the Old Testament and the New Testament, there is chaos because there isn't no set rules on what to do. The New Testament has nothing to say about the Old Testament, nothing that Jesus said, well, now I'm a human, I feel the pain, I feel your pain, so I'm eliminating all these orders, they stay. In fact, Jesus says that this world will end before any even letter from the words of God can end. And therefore, these orders in the Old Testament, they stand. But this is not the point. If they say Islam is violent because of this and that, I'll tell them Christianity and Judaism are violent because of this and that and this and that and this and that and this and that.
And that's what you cover in your book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to allow them to attack Islam knowing what they have in their own house. If you have a house made of glass, you don't throw stones at passerbys, do you?
No. Tell us, you mentioned the sword. Can you go ahead and give us the explanation of this saying?
Yeah, Prophet Muhammad was sent with the sword just before the last hour. He was given permission to fight. It has to be in the sake of Allah, and that's all what he did. Also, he was given permission to collect booty from the war, whereas the children of Israel were not. Plus, Islam has the right and the legislation to preempt any treacherous attack that's been planned by any nation anywhere if they can. Plus, Prophet Muhammad, when he said, I was sent with the sword, it means what? I am allowed to fight, and I am going to raise my sword in defense of this religion of mine. And how did that translate in his practical sunnah? Some nations fought, he fought them. And for that he was sent with the sword. Some nations sought peace, he gave them peace. Some nations sought promise of protection, he gave them protection. So he didn't deal with everybody with the sword. No, he was sent with the sword, meaning he was sent with the establishment that is called jihad in Islam, which again is the self-defense mechanism that Muslims have. Not only against the enemies, but also against their own temptations and the devil and all the trials of this life.
In your book, you also had written, and if you can elaborate on this, that before any preemptive strikes or any jihad, as far as in the battlefield, self-defense, that this has to be done with an Islamic state. Can you go ahead into this a little bit?
That's another thing. You see, when Prophet says, I was sent with the sword, it means the leadership in Islam is the one that establishes jihad. In fact, the Muslim Ummah, which means nation, agrees that those who establish the fighting, the war, actual war, are Muslim rulers. And whether the Muslim ruler is practicing the religion as he should or not, you still have to follow their lead when that is established. In Islam, you cannot establish a group, an armed gang, within a state and act like you're in a state and start making peace and war with the world without permission from Muslim rulers. This is one of the things that 9/11 started by such a group, that they go to a Muslim country ruled by someone else, they establish armed groups, and they start attacking and making peace and war without any regard to the nation they're living in as guests or taking their permission. You can't do that. First of all, jihad is an organized effort for defense and for offense, as I explained.
Yes.
It has to have an army, a leadership, and that's when jihad would most probably succeed. Why? Because you have the effort concentrated in, for example, the fighting. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ established a state, armies, leaders of armies, And they didn't go to fight without his permission, without him telling them to go and do that. In fact, some of the armies, he told them, go and fight, go to that area, and after a day or two, then you open my letter to see the specific commands. And they would go and do that. But it was him who gave these commandments. And this is why the Muslim rulers, Muslim scholars, if you read their books before, it's called books of fiqh. Fiqh means minor aspects of the religion. You will find that jihad is established by the ruler. You find it repeated in almost every book of fiqh, Islamic jurisprudence. You find it there. Because the ruler is the one who's supposed to establish it, not armed groups, not individuals. You don't sit in a corner somewhere and then have some young men around you and say this and that, let's establish war and peace. I'll give you an example. Some of those groups almost led to a nuclear war between India and Pakistan. And this is, to me, so terrible. Why? Because of their ideas about jihad and whatever it is, they would rather, or doesn't matter to them, that millions of Muslims would die on both sides. Because remember, India has 200 million Muslims and Pakistan has about 150 million Muslims. They are both sides. We don't want them to fight. We don't want, because they're going to use weapons of mass destruction that would eliminate millions of people for no reason. They would rather do that so that they can justify their opinion. There is a leader there. You cannot do that. You cannot establish war and peace without having a physical authority on earth, being a head of state or a state that makes this. Now, if an attack comes to a Muslim country all of a sudden, and the authority, the country, the state, is just devastated, there is no authority anymore, people can establish in neighborhoods, some kind of defense. But it has to be temporary, as Imam Ahmad, one of the major scholars of Islam, it has to be temporary until they get the leadership back in line, and then they start again the effort of jihad under the leadership. But in Islam, jihad as a matter of warfare has to be done by the Muslim leader.
Thank you for being with us. We are talking with Sheikh Jalal Abu Rub. And we're discussing his book, Holy Wars, Crusades, and Jihad. He's the author, publisher, translator of over 40 books, mashallah. So we're coming to a close, just a couple more points. Tell us, for the confused Muslims, confused non-Muslims, where do they start now? We're talking about an issue, jihad, and we'd like to thank you for coming to the source. But how about those who are confused by the media, the negative propaganda, and some people who even like twisting the truth? What advice do we give the people?
What can I say more than that? You have to seek knowledge in the religion that you are taken as an enemy or as a friend. I've been studying Christianity since I was young, in Arabic and English. Years and years and years after that, I decided to talk about issues in Christianity and Judaism. But I go to the references. I don't come up with concepts from my own without, going to the resources and, to make sure that what I'm criticizing is found there. What I advise Muslims and non-Muslims alike is that read, ask Muslims about Islam. Do not ask CNN about Islam. Do not ask the evangelicals about Islam. Why? They're already taking sides. I was speaking to some of the Christian audience before, and I said to them, I've read about Christianity extensively in Judaism. I've had none of those media outlets ever contacting me to talk to them about Christianity or Judaism. Why is it every time somebody wants to talk about Islam, it has to be a Christian or a Jew or a non-practicing Muslim?
Who's a so-called expert?
Yes, they're always experts. Can you recite one ayah, verse of the Quran in Arabic? They just come up and say Islam, this Islam and that, and this Muslim society, this and that, and history, this and that. No proof, no references, nothing. They can't even read the resources, they're all in Arabic. And they can't understand the word, that if it is said to them or what it means. It's just awful. Yet you bring people who have no clue what the religion is about that you're attacking, and they are the experts. You never bring me to talk about my religion. So my advice, of course, is that ask Muslims about Islam. Go to our references, ask us questions. Like for example, I mean, I'm just one person. I established an effort on my website, www.islamlife.com.